So anyway, it's my, yeah, Vajratara is also a very, very dear friend. And I definitely feel that my connection with Bante, my connection with my vertical friends has deepened through seeing how she responds and how she lives her life and in a way enacts her going for refuge in a moment by moment basis. So over to you, dear friend.
Oh, thank you very much, Karen and Dee. It's so lovely to see everyone, I must say. It's always hard in the abstract, but then especially, because I haven't been on the whole retreat, but just seeing your little smiling faces in the screen, and so many friends are there that I couldn't possibly, well, I could spend all the talk just reeling off your name as a kind of beautiful mudita exercise. But I wish I was with you all. That's all I can say. I wish we were all together in a big new Tiratanaloka maybe. So yeah, so it's my delight to join you all this morning and to talk about this wonderful theme, which is discovering the guru. So I thought we'll start with the Buddha. It's always good to start with the Buddha. And this very, very key experience he had shortly after his enlightenment, that's recounted in the Gaurava Sutta. So the Buddha's recently gained enlightenment. He's dwelling in this woodland, this sort of, one gets the impression it was a sort of small copse. And at this point, he was under the banyan tree. And he was reflecting, he'd spent a lot of his life reaching this point of liberation, of reaching the point of enlightenment. And he was dwelling under the tree, really reflecting on his experience, allowing his experience to unfold in all the natural directions. And what he said to himself is, one suffers if dwelling without respect or reverence. One suffers, it's dukkha, to dwell without respect or reverence. And he looked around to see who he might respect or revere, who is more developed in ethics, who is more developed in meditation and wisdom and liberation than himself. So it's really important and significant, that impulse that he had. He'd spent so much of his life in this search for liberation. He was liberated. He'd done it. He was at the top. He didn't really need anyone in that kind of functional way to get any further in his practice. So why not settle? Why not just settle and say, like, I've done it? Like, I'm the kind of king of the castle, the king of the jungle. So he did start talking about being the lion in the jungle. But, why didn't he not just stop and say, I've done it? There's nowhere further to go. Nowhere else has gone as far as me, so I can just stay here. There's an interesting impulse, even in the enlightened consciousness itself. And we find this time and time and again, even with the Buddha's disciples, an impulse to look up to others and to train with someone. So that's what he did. He had this impulse to look up, to see who he could train with, because it's suffering if we don't. Very, very interesting that even for the Buddha, he'd say it was suffering if we dwell without respect or reverence. So he looks around and he sees that there's no one more developed than him. No one more perfected in ethics, meditation, wisdom, and liberation. So he says, well, I'll have to rely on the Dharma itself. So Bhante talked about this, one of the papers that he wrote shortly before he died. And it's significant because, it's significant because he chose to rely on the Dharma. So what does the Dharma mean at that point if it's not just his teachings? But it's also significant just because he had that impulse and he had a look to see who he could respect and revere. And he said it's suffering to dwell without respect or reverence. So why is it suffering? I think one of the reasons that it is suffering, and this is what I've reflected on in my own practice, it's suffering because spiritual rebirth itself is awakening to our profound relationship with other people and the world itself. It's a depth realization that we're not separate from each other. And if we're not separate from each other, we cannot do it alone. We cannot live our lives in isolation from others. It's simply not possible because we're not isolated from others. Sometimes I've called this the death of the myth of the lonely heroine. You know, sometimes we've got this myth. I've certainly had this in my life where it's sort of me against all odds and I did it my way. You know, there's this kind of myth of independence. And of course, that's a myth that's very prevalent in modern society. I did it my way. You know, no one's helped me. I'm a self-made man or woman. But of course, from a Buddhist point of view, this is a wrong view. It's a wrong view because from one perspective, we could our lives is just a sum total of our interactions with others. It's a bit like if you tell your life story. Sometimes we tell our life stories in GFR groups or on retreat or to our friends, and try taking out other people from your life story. You can't do it. Your life story is other people. So it's this is who we are. This is who we are. We live in a context. We live in a context of others and the world. And it's very natural in human nature to look up, to respect and revere or admire someone who's more developed than ourselves. So within this psalm of relations, which is our lives, we naturally look up to those people who embody qualities that we admire. And when we look up to people who embody qualities that we admire, we grow in those qualities. That's also part of this life that is us and other people. It's not all on the same level, if you see what I mean. And one of the points that Bhante made is he said to grow and develop, we need two things. We need a bit of suffering, and we need to put ourselves in relation to someone or to some people who are more developed than ourselves. And if we don't do that, we're stuck. And if we're stuck, we suffer. So it's very, very interesting that those two things that we need in order to grow and develop, we need to put ourselves in relationship with people who are more developed than ourselves. And we need a tiny bit of suffering, enough suffering to motivate us to start on the spiritual life. So who are we going to look up to? One very sort of obvious answer is the Buddha. In a way, that's the safe answer. Of course, we look up to the Buddha. He represents the ideal of enlightenment to which we aspire. And, you know, we can contact the Buddha in our imagination by visualizing the Buddha or bringing the Buddha to mind in various ways. We can read about his life, and I really recommend that people do that. I think in my own practice, it's one of the major sources of my own inspiration is to read about the historical Buddha. I find the Buddhist texts, and particularly the life of the Buddha, incredibly beautiful, very, very human, and also more than human. We can also imagine archetypal Buddhas. We can imagine the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas all around us. So we can do all those things. We can imagine the Buddha. We can imagine enlightened beings. We can fill that out in our imagination in colors and lights and stories. And it's really important that we do so. But the Buddha can't give us direct advice as he did when he was walking around North India talking to people. So if you read the stories, you hear how a lot of the teachings that he gave came out of a natural responsiveness to other people, seeing who they were and what they needed, understanding something of their lives. So we need someone more developed than us who can give us guidance in our actual life, from a general principle to a specific application in who we are right now. And the Buddha, by and large, can't do that. Sometimes you feel like he is, which is great, But on a general day-to-day level, we haven't got the Buddha directly in our lives who can give us direct advice. So the guru is the esoteric Buddha refuge. It's what Bhante calls the Buddha principle within the field of the disciples' actual experience. The Buddha principle within the field of the disciples' actual experience. It's the people that we know, the person or people that we know. And that person embodies this part of what we need to grow and develop. This person in our lives who's more developed than us offers us a vision of where we can move, of a vision of the goal, a vision of what we'd like to grow into. And then you've got this ingredient of suffering, which is a vision of what we're moving away from. It gives us a motivator to transcend. So you've got within suffering, you've got the movement away from samsara. And with the guru Buddha principle, the person in your life who's more developed than yourself, you've got the vision of where you're moving towards. So that's the general Buddha principle. It's offering us a vision of where we can go, even if it's just the next step. It doesn't have to be the whole kind of transcendent enlightened being, even if it's just the next step that we need to take. But of course, this can make us very nervous. The Buddha principle, the guru principle, if you like, can make us quite nervous because, of course, it can make us quite nervous to be in a position where we're seeking guidance from anyone. And there's a very natural concern, an important concern, that we might give our power and agency away. And there's a fear that we might do so. So, you know, some of us have heard about different cults, particularly in the 1960s and 70s, where you have a charismatic leader who has so much power over people, who has so much agency in people's lives that they can make them do anything. And actually they have. In history, we've seen various cults where the charismatic leader has made people do things that go against their natural sensibilities or their natural sense of ethics, things that are quite dangerous and damaging. So I think the kind of the fear of giving away power and agency is a legitimate concern, and I think it is something that we do need to watch out for. Bhante addressed this concern in his talk, Is a Guru Necessary? And it's significant that Is a Guru Necessary was given in 1970. And the first thing that Bhante did is he went through what a guru isn't. So the guru isn't a head of a religious group. The guru isn't a teacher. The guru isn't a parent substitute. And the guru isn't a problem solver. They might do all those things. They might be a head of a religious group. They might be teaching. They might on occasion be loving in a way that a mother is loving. And they might help solve problems, but they're not a guru by virtue of any of those things, by any sort of, they're not a guru just because they're head of a religious group. They're not a guru just because they're your teacher. They're not a guru just because they're very motherly towards you. And they're not a guru just because they solve your problems. It's something more than that. So if it's not those things, then what makes a guru a guru? Who are they? What do they embody? What's their kind of function in your life? And I think it's important to find out, you know, who this guru is going to be in your life, who is going to embody this principle of just being, in a way, one step ahead. Because there is a natural urge to look up, and if we're not looking for a real guru, we'll find a false one. And of course, that's what's also happened in society, in the rejection of having people, particularly in spiritual groups, to look up to. Then we tend to look up to people who are unworthy of that status, if you like, or if unworthy of our respect or reverence. Footballers, actors, musicians, all these people in society that we've looked up to, who've turned out not to be worthy of respect or reverence. I was just thinking, actually, I was talking last night about O.J. Simpson, who was a great figure at one point in many people's lives, a great sportsman, and ended up going onto trial for murder and got away with it. But it was clear he had done something, and he was quite a damaged individual. He eventually went to prison for armed robbery. So again and again, we find these figures in society that people have looked up to, but they've looked up to for the wrong reasons. They've looked up to them because they have more money or status or power. So what Bhante does in his talk is a guru necessary? He goes back to the fundamental principles of who the guru is so that we can make our own decisions for ourselves. He's not telling you who your guru should be. So there's 3 principles as to what makes a guru a guru. The first is that it's someone who's more aware, evolved, and developed than us. The second is that we're in regular contact with them. And the third is existential communication. So the first principle is it's someone who's more aware, evolved, and developed than us. And the point is that someone might be more aware, evolved, and developed than us, but we have to recognize it. So the word for respect is garu, which also means weight. It comes from a root anyway, it's garava, but it comes from a root garo, which means weight. So that person is weighty, they're weighty in qualities. And Bhante says about them, he says about that word, he says the word garava has a richer connotation than is suggested by the English words used to translate it. It includes such emotions as admiration, wonder, and delight in the fact that there exist or existed other people, others superior to oneself in creative ability or spiritual attainment. It is akin to such terms as vandana or salutation and puja or worship, all these acts being expressive of positive emotion. So garva is positive emotion, and it's an admiration or wonder or delight that there is someone or some people who are superior to ourselves in creative ability and spiritual attainment. And in a way, one can sometimes contact that. There's that feeling of, there's a feeling of possibility. It enables us to realize that it is possible to be more developed in certain qualities. So, for example, we might be very inspired by the quality of kindness. And when we see other people who are kinder than ourselves or who do acts of kindness that we really respect, it's a delight. Because if it's possible for them, it's possible for us. We might find that we really respond to the qualities of wisdom. And we see someone who's wiser than ourselves, who does something and demonstrates that they're wiser than ourselves, that they open up a possibility that of greater wisdom in any particular situation. And when we experience that, we're delighted. We're delighted that it is possible. It might be that we see that we're very inspired by the qualities of service. I know that I have. And there's been various people in the order that I've been very inspired by because I've seen that life of service is possible. Just to give you an example, there's many, but I would say that about Parami. You know, looking at her life and the way that she's lived her life has been a great inspiration for me. And it makes it possible. Somehow she makes my life possible. I'd say the same thing about Maitreyi. In fact, I've followed in Maitreyi's footsteps to Tiratnaloka, and I'm actually in her bedroom, her old bedroom at the moment. So there's something about what she's done with her life that makes my life possible. And I'm so delighted because when I came across the Dharma, I didn't know that these things were possible. I had these longings within me of further kindness and wisdom and a desire to serve the greater good. but I hadn't got any examples of people who were doing those things, or at least not examples of people who were alive. So when I came across people, my great heroines, if you like Maitreyi or Parami or Dharma Dinner, I was delighted, or Ratnadharani, these people are in my life, but they've opened up a possibility. Their lives, the simple fact of how they live their lives, have opened a door for my life, have shown me a world of possibilities that I didn't even know were possible before I met them and before I got to know them. So that's what the guru's function is, in a way. It's to open a door of possibilities. I remember when I was just about to become a private preceptor, actually, I had a dream. I often have this dream at significant moments where I'm walking down a corridor in a very kind of stately home sort of corridor, very polished wood. And Banti was taking me along these doors, and I kept on wanting to go into one of the side doors. He was saying, "Oh no." And they got to this door at the end and he opened it. And there was this vast room at the end of this corridor. And he just showed me the way in. And of course, that's what the Guru principle or the Buddha principle does. These are people who open the door and show you there's a further possibility. And we feel a sense of reverence and respect whenever we're in a contact with someone who's even a little bit more developed than us in ethics, meditation, wisdom, or freedom. And it's not that they always have to embody those qualities. It's not that they're completely perfect all the time in those qualities. But they open a door to them. They're just a little bit more embodied. They're just little bit more developed in those qualities than us. They show them a little bit more than us, which opens up a possibility. And what we do when we respect them is what we're saying is yes to those qualities. We're saying, yes, I respect and revere and admire those qualities that I find in you. They represent our ideals or what we value most, even to just a smaller, greater extent, if you see what I mean. Something emergent in us that we would like to develop, they show is possible, even to a small degree. And one of the things that the Buddha said is that sometimes those qualities found in others take a long time to discover, and that we discover them in different contexts. Living with people, you get to know their ethics. Working with people, you get to know their integrity. Being with them in good times or bad, you get to know their strength. And when you talk Dharma to people, you get to know their wisdom. That's what the Buddha said. And you get to see just enough wisdom and kindness to inspire us to do something more. That's what we're looking for. So, of course, if we're going to find those qualities in others, we do need to be in contact with them. So the second important feature of discovering the Guru is to be in regular contact with them, and if possible, to live or work, to see people in good times or bad, or to discuss the Dharma with people. Obviously, we might not live and work in those contexts, but even for a moment, even on retreat or on a Dharma project in the Sangha, is a very, very good way to get to know people and to be in regular contact with someone that we admire or people that we admire. So, yes, we need to be in actual living contact with people. And that means putting ourselves in the sphere of people who are more developed than us. Living with them on retreat, working with them on a Dharma project, seeing them in good times and bad, talking about the Dharma to people. The most important way to, in a way, discover the Guru is just to turn up to the Sangha, and you'll find them there. And Bhante made a very important point about this. He said that it's important to be in regular contact with people who are more developed than us, because if we isolate ourselves from people we look up to, they start to become dehumanized. And then he said they start to become a slightly threatening body, an authority that we fear will be annoyed with us. So that's what happens. If we're not in direct contact with people, they start to become abstracted. And when they become abstracted, they can become threatening and they can become an authority figure. So the best way to not let someone become a slightly threatening authority figure is to actually be in direct contact with them, and to see them in good times and bad, and to live with them and work with them, even for short periods of time, and to talk about their Dharma practice with them. So that's one of the things that can go wrong in discovering the guru, is that we're not actually in contact with someone, and as we're not in contact with someone, they become abstracted. So the third thing is existential communication. That's how we discover the guru. And I'll just read a quote from Panti about this. He says, there should be between the guru and the disciples real communication, which means not just communication or sharing of thoughts or ideas or feelings or experiences, even spiritual experiences, but communication of being. If you like, action and interaction of being, which implies each being as fully as possible themselves in relation to the other. It isn't the guru's business to teach the disciple anything. It's the guru's business to be themselves in relation to the disciple. And it is not the business of the disciple as such to learn. What they have to do is simply expose themselves to the being and to the effect of the being of the guru, and at the same time be themselves in relation to them. So there's a lot of emphasis here on being ourselves in relation to someone we look up to or admire. And this, in a way, is the hardest part. It's very, very difficult to be oneself in relation to anyone, let alone someone we respect. And I think that's partly because we don't really know who we are. You know, we're not one person. We're not one consistent person. We find ourselves overtaken by different moods and thoughts, conflicting desires within ourselves. And it's very difficult to just be consistent, if you like. So I don't think it means that being ourselves means we have to, there's this authentic self that we have to be ourselves in relation to. I think what Banti's saying is that we just need to be as honest as possible in any one time. So I found this at walks, going for walks with people at Tiratanaloka. I'm going to let you into a little secret here, which is that when I was in the ordination process, I was so awkward on those walks. Oh my goodness. I would just think, gosh, I'm going to meet with this order member who I really respect and admire, like Ratnadharani or Maitreyi or Anjali. And I'd think, what am I going to talk to them about, you know? And I'd feel really, really blocked and awkward. And in a way, I kind of look back on that and think, I sort of think it's quite sweet, really. But of course, then what happened is I joined the team at Tiratanaloka. And again, I got this feeling like I need to give someone like really profound advice, or they've got to kind of come away from this walk feeling really inspired. And of course, there's no pressure like the pressure to inspire someone. And it took me quite a long time just to drop that, just to not look for an outcome, but just to be as honest as possible and to be as engaged as possible and as interested as possible in someone else's life and in my own life. So I'm not sure that I've completely cracked it, but I do remember Pamavadra's advice to me about this, and he says it does help if you're nosy. So sometimes I'm just a bit nosy about my own experience and a bit nosy about other people's experiences. So I'm sorry if that's sometimes a bit too much, but that's what we're looking for in a way, is we're looking for a sense of interest and engagement and honesty about what's going on for us and what's going on for other people. And within that, something can happen. And this is when, in a way, the guru emerges. The guru emerges when our own going for refuge, the three jewels, is sparked off by the gurus going for refuge to the three jewels. So this is another dynamic that Bhante talks about. In relation to the guru, in relation to someone we admire or respect, our own going for refuges is stimulated. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes the awkwardness just remains. And if the awkwardness just remains, I think all we can do is recognize that that's not actually unethical. It's just awkward. But sometimes what happens is the guru's going for refuge, or the person we respect's going for refuge, ignites our own, and our own ignites theirs. I can tell you it works both ways. And what's happening then is that our inner guru is meeting the outer guru. So what we admire and value about life, what we think about life, what we love about the Dharma, for example, meets what the other person loves about the Dharma, what inspires them, what they value, what they admire. And there's a meeting of values, there's a meeting of aspirations, there's a meeting of longings. So the values that we have said yes to, that we have responded to as emergent qualities in ourselves, are reflected outwardly in another person who's slightly more developed than ourselves. And this is a natural process. It can't come just because someone is an order member or a senior order member. It can't come just because they're very motherly and kind. It can't come because they've helped you out with a problem, or because they're the teacher at your local centre. It comes because it's a natural mutual responsiveness to someone who's slightly more developed than ourselves in qualities that are emergent in us. So it's a natural process. It's not something we say should happen with any one particular person. You should look up to and admire this person. I think we're told that a lot as a child, who we should look up to. So we just got to throw away ideas of who we should look up to and just see who we do look up to, who we do naturally respect and admire, because it tells us something about ourselves and what we ourselves respect and admire, and what our values are, what our emergent qualities are, what our inner guru is. And when the inner guru in ourselves meets the outer guru, it's a very, very wonderful experience. There's a word for this in Pali, it's ottappa, and in hybrid Sanskrit, it's apatrapya. I'll say hybrid Sanskrit because if you try and look it up in the Sanskrit dictionary, it's not there. It's the hybrid Sanskrit dictionary, just for the nerds amongst us. So you might have come across this word before. It goes along with the word hri, which means ethical remorse or ethical shame. And it's known as a guardian of the world. So in this process of apatrapya, what happens is that this is the sort of other side of it. So we share values with someone we look up to, with someone we respect and admire. And when we act not in line with those values that we aspire to, that we recognize in the person that we respect, our sort of aspiration comes into contact with our own unskillfulness in sort of not doing what we admire. So our own sort of sense of what we do admire comes into contact with our own unskillfulness, or the fact that we haven't done those things, or when we act against what we admire. And thinking of the person that we respect, it's quite a strong word. It means we're consumed or we burn with remorse. So sometimes it's called shame in respect of the wise, but I think it's stronger than that. It's remorse in relation to those we respect. It's what Spiti calls reverential shame. So we might have come across this quality of hri, which is when our own aspirations don't reflect our actual behavior and we feel remorse or shame. That's an inner experience. But with apatrapya, it's relational. It's that feeling that when we don't act up to our aspirations, we we feel remorse in relation to someone else that we admire, because they embody our aspirations, they embody our what we're moving towards. And I think this particular experience of apatrapia is very important because it has that combination of suffering that Bhante talked about, the sense of wanting to move away from something, wanting to let go of something, and an experience of what being in relation to what we want to move towards as embodied by another person more developed than ourselves. And these are the key ingredients for growth. A sense of moving away from something, the dukkha of our own unskillfulness when we don't act in line with our aspirations, in relationship to also someone we admire, a vision of what we're trying to move towards. And I think the danger of this dynamic comes because what if the reverential shame comes out of a fear of punishment or withdrawal of love? And there can be a dangerous dynamic where we're attracted to someone who's more developed than us, not from a sense of them reflecting back our own values, but because they reflect back a sense of being bad or unworthy. So this is where the dangerous ground comes with the guru relationship, or the relationship with people we respect or admire, is when we project our own sense of being bad or unworthy onto them. So we have to really make sure it is our own positive sense of remorse that we're feeling in relation to the person we respect, not a negative sense of remorse. We have to really make sure that they're reflecting back our own values and emergent qualities that we've said yes to, and not a sense of feeling bad or unworthy, or a sense that their love is going to be withdrawn or we're going to be punished. So I want to talk about the 3 forms of remorse because I think it will help us in relationship to those we admire. So remorse, which is kaukritya in Sanskrit, remorse comes in 3 forms. So the first form is neurotic, and the second form is functional, and the third form is positive. So neurotic, it's one of kaukritya is one of these words. Remorse can be positive, neutral, or negative. And we have to work out what's going on. So when we feel remorse, when we feel a sense of not doing our best, we have to work out whether it's negative, neutral, or positive. So with neurotic or negative kaukritya, remorse, that feeling that we've done something wrong, and it can be very, very powerfully felt, that feeling that we've done something wrong. If it's neurotic, it's based on fear of punishment or withdrawal of love if we do something wrong. And the danger of this is that we can become hyper-vigilant to an idea of what other people want and then start conforming to that. So we're so frightened of the people that we respect and admire withdrawing their love from us, that we're hyper-vigilant to try and work out, okay, what do they want so that they won't withdraw their love from us. And it can be accompanied by a pervasive sense of shame or worthlessness. So this is a very interesting experience from a Buddhist point of view, this pervasive sense of shame or worthlessness. And it comes from a perception that this is the true self. And because it comes with a perception that this is our true self, it can be extremely seductive. Because finally, even though it's a difficult, unpleasant experience, we feel like we finally found out who we really are. We finally found out that the underlying view of self, which is shameful or unworthy of love. And then when we do something unskillful, that's the kind of sense of self that kicks in. Oh yes, I knew it. I knew who I really was. So from a Buddhist point of view, Bhante talks about this actually in Know Your Mind. It comes from a sense of possibly in the past that love has been withdrawn from a major figure in your life, or the withdrawal of love has been threatened by an important figure in your life. There's been a sort of severing of love, if you see what I mean, a withdrawal of love in quite a major way, particularly as a child. And to explain this to ourselves, to explain this severing of love, we think to ourselves, it must be because I'm not worthy of love. That's why we try and explain the severing of love to ourselves by thinking, well, it must be because I'm not worthy of love. It must be because I've done something wrong. But of course, we don't know what we've done wrong because we haven't really done anything wrong. So we think it must be just because our self is in some way wrong. We've got a sense of self. It's wrong. Therefore, they've withdrawn their love. It's a very, very painful state of being to be in. And it's worth reflecting, if we feel bad or wrong, whose voice are we really listening to? Whose voice is telling us that we're bad or wrong? Because we can project that voice onto the people that we respect and admire. And in order to heal that wound, if you like, in order to heal that severing or that cut, we need love. We need to be restored in love. But the problem is, because it's quite well, it's a severing. It's a sort of wound in our experience. We look for big love. We look to heal that sense of love from, particularly from romantic partners, but also from a guru figure. We look from an enormous sense of absolute unconditional love and support that's going to heal this breakage that happened in our past. They're going to come in, they're going to rescue me, and they're going to make me feel worthy of love again. And the problem is that never quite works. And this is a point that Bhante made, it means that we can miss out on the smaller acts of love. So in order to heal negative kalkritra or negative remorse or that feeling of shame or worthlessness, what we need is to focus on the regular love that we do receive from our friends, our partners, the people we respect and admire, the small acts of appreciation, the small acts of kindness. We need to focus on where the love actually is, not where we want it to be in this kind of unconditional source. But to focus on where it actually is, those small acts of love and understanding and kindness. So when I talk about this, I am sort of talking from quite a lot of my own experience. And one of the things that I did once on solitary retreat is I bought all my birthday. It was just after my birthday, and I brought all my birthday cards and I put them all around the shrine. And I read them again and again and again, because I could see that in me is this kind of longing for a complete and utter and total all-consuming experience of love. And what that did was it made me miss out on where the love actually is, which I'm receiving all the time from my Sangha friends. And I think the other thing that's really good is confession, because we say the worst things about ourselves to our Sangha friends, and they don't reject us. In fact, they just are pleased that we're coming to them with that confession because it brings us closer. So we're not rejected. So I think all these things, these small acts of love and understanding and consideration, those are the real, that's the real medicine, that's the real balm. It's neurotic kalkritra is neurotic because we look for that complete experience of love in people who cannot possibly give us that complete sense of love. But we have got love. We have got love in our lives, and we look for it where we have it. And in those people, who love us, our friends who love us, what they'll see in our lives is they'll see the things that we're working with them with, and they'll see it with eyes of compassion. So the guru or the person that we respect and admire understands us. They understand our habits. They understand the weight of habits that we've been, picking up for lifetimes. And they don't blame us for having those habits in the first place. They don't wish us to be different than we are. They're just pleased that we can grow and develop. So it's not about kind of blaming people because they have a habit of anger, for example. That's built up over possibly lifetimes. What we're pleased with is someone's motivation to aspire to something beyond anger. That's what's really joyful. That's the true miracle of the spiritual life, is when we turn away from our unskillfulness again and again and again and again and turn towards skillfulness. It's such a joyful thing. So our friends just see the work that we're doing. They just see ourselves freeing ourselves from our old tendencies again and again and again. I remember once having a very, very difficult time. I was in a very difficult position in my life. And I couldn't quite get free of this situation. And I sat down next to Ratnadarani at a talk on an order weekend, and she just looked at me. And she really looked at me. She took my whole being in, and she said, "You will sort this out." And then she just turned back again. And that was the best thing that anyone could have said to me at that point. It was that trust. You'll sort it out. You will. You've got enough in you to sort this out. And I did. And I did partly because of her confidence that I would. She didn't blame me for getting into the situation in the first place. She could see what tendencies I was working with. She was just affirming that I had enough in me to be able to move beyond it, enough trust and confidence in my practice. And her confidence, she held that confidence and trust in my practice for me when I couldn't hold it for myself. And what that enabled me to do was to trust myself again and to in a way fulfill her confidence. Because she had confidence in me, I acted from the best in myself, sort of not quite to prove her right, but to because I knew she was confident in me, even if I couldn't quite experience it in the moment, I could have confidence in myself. So yes, so the love is there, the love is there, the confidence is there, the qualities are there, the inner guru is there reflected in the outer guru, and we need to come back to that inner guru, even if sometimes it's held for us by the outer guru. But that's what we're doing. We're coming back to our own emergent qualities and to the love that's there. So the other form of Kalkritra is functional, which is remorse that is not because you've done anything particularly unskillful. It's just the remorse of being alive in this world and being sometimes in a slight loss of mindfulness. So, for example, I was swimming in the river the other day, and as I pulled myself up onto a rock, the splash of a wave killed a fly, or at least it took the fly into the water. I don't know if it killed it, and of course I felt remorse. I felt remorse because that fly was quite happily sitting on a rock before me, before I came along and sploshed it. And I felt really sad. I didn't want it. I wanted that fly to live its own little fly life on a little wet rock in Wales. And I came along and hurt it. And I felt remorse about that. But it's not unskillfulness because it wasn't intentional. Maybe there's a lack of mindfulness, but it's more of a kind of neutral remorse. And then there's skillful remorse. So skillful remorse is when our natural moral sensitivity comes up against our behavior. And in this natural, skillful, positive remorse, this is more in line with apatrapya, true apatrapya. There's a beneficent, friendly presence of our friend as a constant, loving reminder to act in line with our better nature. So that's what happened with Ratnadarani in that instance. It was her beneficent, friendly presence in my consciousness that enabled me to remain in touch with what I most value and aspire to be. And they're there as a reminder to ourselves of our own emergent qualities, of what we value in our mind. They don't have to be naturally present. They don't actually have to be physically present. They can also just be a presence in our own mind. So just to give you another example, there was another time I was actually in real hatred towards someone, and I was deeply ashamed of being in such a state of ill will and hatred. And I felt like I was actually poisoning myself. I felt like I was rotting myself from the inside, and I was deeply ashamed. And I went to my tray to confess it, and she didn't need to say a single word. She's my preceptor. She witnessed my taking of the precepts of ordination, and now she was witnessing me confessing to a break of the precepts that I took at ordination. She didn't say a word. She just sat there and listened. And as she sat there, I just felt this kind of white light emerging in the room, sort of from her, but sort of between us. And then at the end of my heartfelt confession, she reached over. She had a teddy bear, and she was going away after that meeting. And she said, "I'm going to lend you my teddy bear. And this teddy bear is the Apatrapya teddy bear to remind you of your ordination vows." And I was also going on a kind of tour of I was going to the east of England to go to visit various centres in the car. So I took the Apatrapya teddy bear with me wherever I went, just to remind me of my precepts. So this is real apatrapya. This is the real kind of guru principle in action. It's dynamic. It's playful. It means that we can put our unskillful down. The thing with neurotic cow creature is it can't be put down because we identify with it, because we think it's our true self. And it makes it very, very difficult then to talk to someone about their unskillfulness. They become very unreceptive because they think they know that they're bad. So this is the state called anapatrapya. It's the opposite of apatrapya. It's rebellion or self-blame. It makes it very, very difficult to talk to someone about their behavior and to help them if they just think that whatever we say, that they're a bad person. What we're looking for in that kind of guru principle, that Buddha principle, is we're looking for skillful kalkricha arising in relationship to someone more developed than ourselves, who we respect and admire, who stands for our own values. This is true apatrapya. And when we have true apatrapya, we've got our guru. One of the things that Bhante said, he says, the whole point of apatrapya is not to submit to other people's ideas of what one should be doing, ideas that other people want to impose on one, but to follow the ideal that one has chosen for oneself with the help of certain people whom one has also chosen. The point is that we choose. It's our inner guru responding to the outer guru. We choose. We are in control. We choose people that we respect, who have our welfare at heart and who understand our situation. So who are we going to have this relationship with? In a way, the obvious person is our preceptor. We respect their practice of the precepts enough to ask them to witness our taking of the precepts. But the guru or the Buddha principle also may arise at any time with anyone where vertical Kalyana Mitra arises. And I start to think of this principle as not just one person, but as a kind of vibrant energy concentrated more perhaps in particular people, our Kalyana Mitras or our preceptors, but also can arise like sparks or lights in different people in different contexts. You know, that we might be on retreat and we might just feel that respect or reverence in relation to someone who's more developed than ourselves in a particular area. And when it does arise, then we have a special connection with someone, even if it's fleeting, even if it happened only during one retreat. And even if they fall back from what we valued in them, it's very, very easy to be cynical and to drop both the person and what we valued about them when they do something that we don't respect or admire. But I think we've got to remember that at one point, they stood for something. They stood for something that we had a deep yes to. And even if they occasionally fall away from that thing, then we don't have to fall away from the value itself. It doesn't mean that the value that we shared was wrong. It means that they fall away from that value at that time. They stood for our own value. They shared it with us. And perhaps it's sometimes us who has to hold the value when our friend can't or doesn't. So, for example, we might admire the quality of kindness. We might find that more developed in our friend, but the person that we look up to or admire. And then at some point, they're not that kind, or they do something a little bit unkind. But we can remain loyal to the kindness that we found in them, despite them not fulfilling it on every occasion. And I think in a way, there's that whole kind of area of betrayal of someone not, in a way, embodied the values that we respect and admire at all times can be a purifying experience. Because we realize that it's the values that we share. It's the values that we share that are the most important thing. And it can also purify us of having identified the guru just with someone who's a religious superior, or, a senior order member, for example, or someone who's very motherly towards us or solves our problem or who teaches us the Dharma. We're sort of purified of those relationships, and we just come back to the value that we share in itself. We've got long relationships with each other in the order. I do think that sometimes they're lifetimes relationships. I think we'll find each other again and again, and there will be ups and downs. And in a way, it's up to us to have fidelity to what we value, even in life and death, even in cycles of life and death. We see each other through it all. And the main thing is to have fidelity, to remain true to our values. And in those relationships that we have over lifetimes, there's sometimes emerges a relationship between, we could say, guru and disciple, or preceptor or ordinand, or people we respect and admire. That will emerge naturally during those relationships throughout lifetimes. And when it does emerge, it's very, very beautiful. Maybe we express it differently in our modernized, globalized culture than we did in the old days of Tibet. Maybe it emerges differently from us, but I think the principle is still there. And when it emerges, when that kind of Buddha principle or guru principle emerges, naturally, it's a very, very beautiful thing. And in a way, what it's doing is it leads beyond itself. So the inner guru and the outer guru are in mutual responsiveness until the difference between them is transcended. And when that happens, the guru has opened a doorway through to that larger experience, which is beyond both of us. And in that experience, all phenomena shows us the way. All experiences are the guru. Everything, all experiences of our lives, everything that happens in our lives reflects what we value and what we aspire to be. In a way, the guru principle undoes itself. The Buddha principle undoes itself. And maybe that's what the Buddha was describing in the Gaurava Sutta. The desire to look up is then finds its object in the Dharma, in the truth itself. What Bhante said, what makes enlightenment possible, the principle that makes enlightenment possible. The desire to look up is found in everything, is found in the truth itself. So what I want to do is just end by a poem by Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, apparently his favorite evening activity when they had nothing to do was to sit around with his disciples and talk about his gurus, to talk about his teachers. And apparently they loved it. They were all so happy for Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche to talk about his teachers and his gurus. And when he'd talk about them, he'd just have tears falling down his face with joy. And apparently the disciples loved it. It was their favorite way to spend their evening with their teacher. So then his songs, in his verses, there's a beautiful responsiveness between his own wealth, the teacher's love, and the teacher pointing the way to reality. So I'll end with this poem. The ultimate teacher, the absolute, is never separate from us. Yet immature beings, not recognizing this, look outside and seek him far away. Soul Father, with your immense love, you have shown me my own wealth. I, who was a pauper, constantly feel your presence in the depths of my heart. Wisdom teacher, pervading all the world and beings, samsara and nirvana, you show how all phenomena can arise as teachings, convincing me that everything is the absolute teacher. I long for ultimate realization and feel your presence in the depths of my heart. I long for ultimate realization and feel your presence in the depth of my heart.